Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. Thanks for tuning in. You guys are always a wonderful audience. We certainly appreciate you guys. Be sure to tell your friends, neighbors, relatives, cousins to subscribe to the show. We certainly appreciate you guys doing it as well. Be sure to go to iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube. You can hit that like button, notifications button, the little bell thing, so that you can get notifications when the show goes live. Also go to patreon.com/Chris Voss, and of course, the ChrisVossShow.com. We got a wonderful, interesting guest and author that we're bringing to you today, so I'm sure she's going to have some great stories. It's Bri Seeley. She's an inspirational woman who supports women around the world to bring their visions to life. Bri is motivated by a deeply held belief that every woman deserves to live a life that inspires her, and her work reflects this deep remembering that our desires are ultimately inevitable. A catalyst, speaker, and best-selling author of Permission to Leap, her book, Bri is a regular contributor for the Huffington Post and Influensive. Am I pronouncing that right? Influensive?
Yep.
Which I believe is a website. And is known around the world for compassionate yet tell-like-it-is guidance that creates massive and epic changes in every woman she encounters. You have seen her on NBC's The Today Show, Forbes Incorporated, Medium PBS, Free Enterprise, and now The Chris Voss Show. Welcome to the show, Bri.
Hi, thanks for having me.
That's quite the bio you got there.
Thanks.
Nice.
I've worked very hard to be where I am.
Well, congratulations. There's a lot of hard work, and getting it recognized is awesome. So, Bri, give us your plugs on the website so people can be looking up your domains and stuff, and as we go through our discussion.
Yeah, I'm on all the social channels as Bri Seeley.
Okay.
My website is briseeley.com, and you can find my book, Permission to Leap, on Amazon.
There you go, amzn.to. Order that baby up. So what's the book about? Should we start off talking about that and what you wrote about?
Absolutely. So the book called Permission to Leap, it's all about taking leaps of faith. So I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women about their dreams, their desires, what they want from life. And there's a big thing that stops a lot of them is this concept of the unknown. So if you're saying yes to this vision, this idea, this creation, we never know how it's going to play out. But we really, really want to know how it's going to play out. And so the book was written to kind of support people in saying yes to taking that leap, whatever it is, whether it's relocation, whether it's getting the job of their dreams, whether it's starting a business, whatever that leap is, that vision is, giving them the confidence to say yes to it, and then the resiliency to be able to see it through.
Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of women on the show that are great coaches for other women, talk about empowering women and coaching them and helping them to become entrepreneurs and to get out there. There was the great book by the Facebook, I think she's the head of finance. I forget her name right now, but she wrote the book Lean In. And I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but there's been seems to be a lot of support systems going on, a lot of great coaching that's out there to help women really get into the entrepreneurial workforce, to take the kind of leaps of faith you're talking about. Yeah,
and I think it's a really important time in the history of women's rights, women's movements, and everything. I looked back on. I'm currently reading a book about like the days of Arthur, King Arthur, back in the day, and reading or watching, just watched The Marvelous Miss Maisel about a woman in the 50s whose husband leaves her, and like what you do then. And looking back through the history, women have consistently been told, and oftentimes not even given a choice, that like their power lies in the hands of other people. And I think for one of the first times, we are starting to really see and recognize that we have had the power all along. And we're actually starting to stand up and be like, no, this is what I want. And I have the ability to create it. I don't need for someone else to gift it to me. I don't need permission from anyone else. I need to give myself permission and go out and do what it is that I desire. Like I said, whether that's getting a promotion, whether that's starting a business, whether it's going for the job you've always wanted, relocating to a city you've always wanted to live in, and ultimately just building the life that you want instead of reacting to the life that's been given to you.
Mm-hmm. I know that in my experience with owning companies and having sales organizations that were largely commission based, sometimes we'd offer a draw, but it was usually a draw against commissions. One challenge we always had, because we were open to hiring both men and women, but one challenge we had was a lot of women wouldn't want to take the job that we'd offer them because it was commission only, and they were concerned with the risk. And women, or at least what I found then, tended to be very security driven, which is very smart for them, because usually they're kind of the caretakers of the family. They're kind of the balanced one who, takes care of the family and the kids, make sure that the bills get paid. And a lot of guys can kind of live kind of out there on the edge a little bit, and they can be married to one. But I imagine security is one of those things you have to address in your book, and in helping women, approach this sort of element.
Yeah, I actually would say that that's less about security and more about, I heard some statistics that, like, if a man and a woman were to read the same job posting, and the man only had like 3 of the, say, 20 characteristics required, he'd still apply for it and be like, I'm going to get that. If a woman read it and she had 19 of the 20 characteristics but was missing 1, she won't even apply for the job because she's like, well, I'm not qualified. And so I think that there's a shift in perspectives in that women don't believe in themselves oftentimes, and as much as men do. And so I could see a woman looking at that job and being like, oh, my income is dependent on me, essentially. And like, what if I don't perform? And then if I don't perform, I don't get paid. And it's easier to, again, put my power in the hands of another person and have that security, have that income. Because if I take responsibility for it, then whether I succeed or whether I fail, it's all on me. Yeah. And I think the word that I've actually been gifting to women this year is responsibility.
Yeah.
We look at that thing.
Why are women more insecure that way? I know that another reason that a man will go for those jobs is because we're kind of numbers game oriented. We know that if we hunt enough, we kill stuff. We kind of have that brain with our caveman hunter sort of perspective. I mean, I back when I worked for myself, I'd apply for jobs I wasn't qualified for because you're just like, what if, numbers game. And why is it that women would feel that way, where they would why they would feel that way about, if they don't have one of the not 20?
I mean, I think a lot of it just has to do with history, right? Like, women for centuries, millennia, have been told, like, you're only good enough to be a mother, or, you don't have what it takes, or like women have been diminished a lot over the entire, not the entire history of mankind, because there was a time when women were the matriarchs, right? But I think it's just something that's become really ingrained within us. Even looking back, my grandmother's still alive, and looking back at the things that she's been told throughout her whole life about what's possible for her by all these external things, and luckily I was able to grow up in a time where both my mom and my grandmother continually reinforced in me that whatever I want is a possibility to me. Not every woman is raised like that. I was in the hospital visiting a friend who just had a baby, and this little girl was days old, and immediately everyone started placing their expectations on who this little girl was going to be and how she was going to grow up. And like, oh, she's going to be such a great mother. Well, what if she doesn't want that?
What if she gets on heroin and crack and isn't a great mother?
What if she decides she wants to build a $1 billion business and doesn't want to be a mother? Or what if, exactly, and which is my story. I am child-free, and I'm very openly and purposefully child-free. And just these expectations that people place on women, and I think a lot of women are more apt to be like, okay, and they take other people's expectations of them, versus guys are like, I don't want that. I'm going to go do my own thing. And I don't know if it's just a mindset or a cultural thing or what it is, but
I think it's everything combined. I think it's women have a lot of insecurities just on the way that they're built, both chemically and then, and I think they're built that way for a reason, because they're more the nesters, they're more that take care of the families. And I'm not trying to put anyone in a box here when I say that. They really are from the DNA of how our society is built. We're the hunters, they're the gatherers. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be available to the opportunity. So anyone who's listening, don't take me wrong there. But we are dealing with our societal norms and our society norms are changing, but we're dealing with that change of, I remember when my mom was supporting equal rights for women. What was it called in the ERA? She was going to ERA rallies in the 70s. And she was supporting equal rights for women, getting women in the job force and stuff. But I think part of what we fight is that basic DNA of who we are and what we should be. And then I think you're right. It's a combination of everything that can hold people back. Society's expectations. I know there's still some religions now that women grow up in that, still treat them as what in my opinion, are second-class citizens. They go, well, since you don't have a penis, you don't have the priesthood. So, because there's some religions that actually treat women as second-class citizens because it all goes back to, well, because of Eve, we got kicked out of the Garden of Eden and all that silliness. And the Bible and some of these different tomes are actually really negative towards women and actually treat some of their natural states of reproductive organs as dirty and filthy. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine who is Muslim, and she's not allowed to go to church and pray at certain times of the month, and because she's deemed as dirty. And you're just like, really? And so I imagine a lot of those, like people in religions, and I think it's just everything. It's between society and everything else. They put these things on people, and they need people like you and books like yours to break through and go, hey, I can get out of this box and I don't have to think in this box anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I was just kind of riffing the other day and that came out was really, I'm here to remind people that the things that exist in their heart are as equally as important as the things that exist in their head. We get so bogged down by our thoughts and our beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves and all that stuff. And that stuff becomes so real to us. And it really is no more real than the stuff that's existing in our hearts. And we all have the opportunity to really say yes to what's existing in our hearts. We're just not taught to. We're taught to stay in our heads, to allow the stories, the beliefs, the limitations, the thoughts to rule and drive us. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. In fact, one of my guests who's coming on the show in the future, she also coaches women. And one of the premises she talks about is it took her 6 years of trying to start her business to finally get it together. And part of what was interesting is she talks about the approach that women take to starting a business is very different than a man, about trying to be prepared for stuff. And I know that from my experience in dealing with entrepreneurs, whether they're both men and women, a lot of people fail because they try and they spend too much time trying to get prepared for it, when a lot of entrepreneur stuff is you just got to get on the roller coaster and go for it.
I just got asked last night by a girl, because I had 2017 was a roller coaster for me. It was so many highs and so many lows. And I mean, it was bananas. And she said, how do you prevent that stuff? How do you prevent those things from happening or coming your way? And I said, you can't. You really can't. And you can't prepare for them. Like, you can't prepare for shitstorms. You just can't. They just happen. The difference is you build the resiliency to be able to manage them. And I think that that's a really important key that I also include in the book, is like strengthening your inner resolve, strengthening your inner, problem solver, and being able to have that resiliency when something happens on your outside world, to be able to then respond to it from an empowered, calm, just present place, I think.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me. I think it's really powerful. There's a bunch of Hollywood women who just came out with a new hashtag, and I'm trying to remember what it is, but
my assistant was just looking it up. What was the name of the?
There's 300 actresses that signed on to it.
Time's Up. It just came out. They just announced on Monday.
There we go. Yeah, so that just came out. I think that's really powerful, because one of the challenges I would see in the wow, it is Monday, or it's a Monday morning for me, I guess, coffee wise. But what the Me Too, one of the problems I saw with the Me Too thing was this is a great cause, but I hope Hollywood doesn't go back to being Hollywood and all the other workplaces around the world that after this fades away, this will go to that. And I think that's going to be a great coalition, especially in like places like Hollywood that do set a standard. And I'll offer you this, and I'll let you decide whether I'm right or not, but Hollywood probably also does have an effect on how women see themselves and women's roles in society. Is that true? Or
absolutely. These are the stories that we watch every single day, from television to movies to everything else. I mean, these are the people that we look up to. These are the stories that get put in our brain as truths. And so if we're constantly watching movies where, I think I just saw the preview for the Avengers, and of course there's only like one woman, right? Like, and I don't even think it was Wonder Woman. It was the blonde girl.
Tells you how
I know, right? I'm so bad. I don't really go to the movies, but I just went and saw Star Wars, and I have to say, Star Wars was very well done. There were most of the resistance is being led by women. It was all minorities. I mean,
the lead role is a woman, isn't it?
Well, Carrie Fisher is, and then the Jedi girl. That kind of goes after Kylo Ren, and but it's true that and Gina Davis started an institute about this as well, of like really looking heavily at all of these movies, all of these shows, all of these, especially children's things, where the majority of roles are for men, and we're telling men's stories, and so women watch this, and then we see that the women's roles are like secretaries or housekeepers, or like these are the roles that we're told are available to us. And this is why, I know I mentioned it earlier, I just watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel on Amazon. There's only 8 episodes. It is hands down the best show that I have ever seen.
Is that the one where I think I've been seeing the ads for it, where she's doing stand-up sometimes and finding roles, I think in the early 20s or 40s or 50s. Something?
Yeah.
I've been seeing the ads for it. It looks kind of interesting, but I don't watch much TV or movies, obviously.
This is one to actually sit down and watch. It's not only is it witty and very well written, but the whole premise behind it is that her husband comes home and says that he's leaving her. And it's in the 50s. Like, she literally has nothing. And she has to go out and like make something for herself because she has nothing to rely on. She has to move back in with her parents and her 2 kids, right? In the 50s. And she has no money to her name. She has no job experience. She has no power. And she has to go out and create that for herself. And it is a brilliant, brilliant show. And I think that stories like that are the really important ones that need to be being told right now, because little girls growing up watching that stuff are going to come into this world, even boys, even guys watching that stuff. They're going to come into this world with a whole different perspective for women on what's possible for them, for men on seeing women as an equal. I mean, it changes the entire narrative. And I grew up watching things like Cinderella. So what do? Wait for my Prince Charming to show up, right? Like, it's your life
isn't fulfilled until he shows up, basically, the narrative. The thanks, Disney.
Well,
I'm still
he
stuck on the
ended up
narrative that
selling.
there's really true love out there, that's endless, unconditional true love, and I'm still buying that Disney story.
I mean, I
So,
think I know that there is. I know that there is.
all right, I'm going to believe
I
in
don't
your
think that
dream,
that's a story.
because my dream's dead.
I know that there can be. I know that it's possible.
It's
Put
possible.
it
Possible. I'm getting my unconditional love right now from a dog, so that's working out really well.
I get mine from 2 cats, so I'm right there with you.
Pets make the world go round. I often tell people the more I know humans, the more I like dogs. Yeah, I think it's a combination of everything, and certainly our society is changing. You were talking about how hard it was in the 50s. I remember one of my girlfriend's moms. She had an alcoholic husband who was abusive in the 60s, and she got divorced. And one of the problems was it was really hard to be a divorced woman with kids in the 60s, and there really wasn't the sort of, I don't know what you call it, but the different support systems, like now you can go on Tinder and meet anyone you want, or Match.com or whatever. There really wasn't any of that. And in fact, it was interesting to me when I was a child. All the women would buzz and gossip about the one lady on the street on, the whole block who was divorced. Oh, that divorced woman on the block. What did she do? And she was kind of the outcast that all the women would talk about. And now it's almost kind of like the opposite. If you're on a street, if there's one person who's been married for 20 years, you're kind of like, those people are weird. What's going on with them?
I mean, so my great grandmother back in the 20s, her husband was a bootlegger and an alcoholic. And she decided, I mean, if this tells you anything about who I am, I come from a long lineage of like kick-ass women. She decided in the 20s that wasn't acceptable. And she divorced him. And as a result of it, she was excommunicated from the Catholic Church.
Oh, wow.
She had to
That's
put
right. The Catholic Church does that, huh?
She had to put her children in foster care because she had everything that she owned was his. And she chose to literally let go of everything in order to create what she wanted. And she did. She put her kids in foster care. So my grandmother was in foster care for several years with her siblings. And my great-grandmother went out and she got a job at the State Department in Washington, D.C., and she worked her way up. And little by little by little, she was able to make a place for herself in the world. My grandmother and all her other siblings got to come back home. But it's hard. It is hard when you are a woman and you're looking at, okay, I can stay in a not so great situation, but like I'm fine. Or I have to literally let go of everything in my life, including my children, in order to have a good existence in the world. And it becomes really, really, really difficult for women. It's hard to see outside of our circumstances. It's hard to see the possibility past our current situations. And
yeah, I know my mom in our teens reached a point with my father not being able to make enough money and having issues. She said, screw it, and went to school. And for a lot of years we felt ignored, and we had to start doing everything for ourselves, which actually really helped me when I got older, especially as a man, knowing how to do my own laundry and wash my own dishes. That actually came in, I meet guys that are like, you don't know how to do your own laundry. And overall, it really paid off for her. She became a school teacher, made a great retirement. She lives very nicely now in the retirement she's hard earned. But yeah, we had to go through that suffrage for quite a few years where she went to school. But she came out of it much better. And I think kind of we did too, from what we learned from it. But at the time it was hard on us as kids, but certainly her being in a society where, she can have that power now and being able to do stuff is going to be awesome. And I fully support what they're doing in Hollywood. I'm so sick of Hollywood's repetitive, lame stories. And, you know, in recent years, we've seen so many great Oscars and Academy Awards going to women directors, women producers, women writers. And to me, just having more women involved in Hollywood than there have been in the past will hopefully bring better films, better stories, better narratives, and all that sort of good stuff where, you know, I hate going to Hollywood movies and even TV shows of such, because you can predict what's going to happen in the first 5 minutes of the movie. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I got the plot to this one.
To be honest, I almost didn't go see Star Wars, and I am an avid Star Wars fan. Like, I have a Star Wars shirt, and I always get asked, like, do you actually like Star Wars, or is that a joke? And I'm like, no, my 14-year-old birthday party was Star Wars themed. Like, I am a legit Star Wars fan. And after the one from 2 years ago, I saw it and I was like, meh. Like, it was fine. It was visually stunning. It was good. It was whatever. But I almost didn't go see this one. And there was an article that got written about it that talked about, you know, the women's roles in it and the power of the resistance, like just the way that it was written, the storyline they told. And I read that and I was like, all right, I'm going to go. And I was not disappointed. It was such a great movie. And I think a lot of it was, there were a lot of women involved in it, and a lot of minorities, and a lot of, I mean, it was a Star Wars. Like, I have never experienced Star Wars in my life. I didn't think that the movies in the 70s could ever be outdone by the Star Wars franchise. And I firmly believe that this one did it. And so I feel the shift. You know, I'm lucky enough to live in Hollywood, so I literally get to like feel the shift. But I'm really excited that when that announcement came out this week about Time's Up, I read it and I was laying in bed at like 6 o'clock, just like shivers, chills over my entire body. So excited. I just gave it to my assistant today and was like, we need to be talking about this. We need to be sharing it. We need to be encouraging women. That this year is the year for each of us taking responsibility for ourselves and taking responsibility for everyone else as well. The thing I love about the Time's Up movement is that, yes, it's a bunch of actresses, but what they're doing is making it safe for other women as well, women in support roles, housekeepers. I think there was some stuff that came out, especially in LA, about like the agricultural workers that are women and the abuse that they face, and how this movement is really supporting so many women at so many levels. And it's not just a bunch of like high paid actresses being like, well, we deserve more money. It's really hitting all of the layers and levels of women in the world. That's what
I think it's going to be really important. And as you mentioned, it shines a light on, and it sets a pedestal, because I mean, so many of us do look to Hollywood sometimes for norms, society norms. You can even say that one of the problems with Hollywood is they teach you that beauty is everything. And there's been a lot written about how young girls look to these women who sometimes are very, very skinny, to a point that it's not, you know, something someone in the real world can normally, especially if you're having kids and, you know, living your life and stress and all that sort of good stuff, where you're not a trillionaire. You know, you're doing everything yourself. You're not hiring assistants. You're going to put on a couple pounds. I know I have. And so, you know, and sometimes that affects young girls and women when they see these ultra extreme sort of perceptions. They're told, well, you have to be like that too, or suggested that to them by advertising.
I was my 2 degrees are both in fashion. I was in fashion design. I lived in Italy studying fashion for several years. I came back to the States and started my own fashion brand. And I saw what it would do to these women and girls. And even, you know, I remember like ordering pizza for my models one day, and everyone was like, oh, you're doing what? Like, not only are you feeding them, but you're like feeding them pizza. And I'm like, yeah, they're humans, and I need my girls to not pass out on the runway. Like, I would rather that they're healthy and that they're taken care of than, like, I have heard so many horror stories of a friend of mine worked in New York at a label that I will not name, but 14-year-old girls backstage, models, snorting cocaine before the show. Like, stories
like
of,
a lot of people don't realize some of those bodies are built on cocaine and meth.
Yeah, Ellen DeGeneres' wife was told back when she was modeling when I think she was 14, to turn around, and her thighs like weren't far enough apart, and she was like denied. I mean, just so much abuse and unhealthy things that, like, I'm glad that women are finally taking a stand and being like, this is unacceptable.
And and I think too, you know, we almost need a disclaimer in society as to how you got there. You know, I've had girlfriends that in their childhood they suffered abuse, and they were cutting. And then I remember one friend who I believe it's bulimia, where you throw up your food so you don't ingest it. Is it bulimia?
Yeah.
And she had done it so much that the acid from her stomach had eaten the valve piece that opens and closes off your stomach. And so they had to go in and put some sort of device in there to hold her stomach closed. And fortunately for her, or unfortunately for her, even at 40, she was telling me she regretted having it done because she couldn't throw up anymore. And I was just like, okay. But it kept her from being able to throw up anymore because of the way this device is built. But she lived that way for so many years, and it did, horrendous damage to her body. And
your mind too. Yeah. And that's really the biggest part is I'm learning hypnotherapy right now. And the more I start to understand about the way that our mind works and the realities that we create for ourselves, and how many years of that can create this altered reality in your mind about that this is normal, that this is how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to hate ourselves. We're supposed to throw up our food. We're supposed to be abused. Like all of the stories that we tell ourselves. And, one of the things that I'm just really committed to is helping women transform those stories and just really remember and realize that, yeah, this thing happened and it sucks. Like it really, really, really sucks. And we still get an option for something else. Like we get the opportunity to heal. We get the opportunity to develop that inner resiliency. We get the opportunity to live the life that we were born to live, that we deserve to live.
And I think one of the other interesting elements is, and I think it's multifaceted. I don't think anyone can point to one thing, but that's what we have to address in our society going on right now. And we certainly have found that sex abuse, especially towards women, is much higher than anyone thinks about. And I think it is still even far higher because I don't think a lot of women come forward, or men. For men, it's well, I don't know if it's different. It's still shame. But one thing that's interesting to me is, is it because women are put on that narrative and shown the Disney movies where they're the princess, and they have to wait for the guy to come fulfill them, the Romeo or Prince or whatever. Is it that narrative that gets so ingrained in them that they really buy that theory that they're not complete unless they get that other person? Is that a main driver or not?
I mean, it's hard to say. I don't know if I have any knowledge or experience about that. I know that is a narrative that harms women. I also know, like from studying hypnotherapy, what happens when, especially as children experience abuse like this, we start telling stories about, how we deserved it and how I like, and it's so different for every single woman that I know that's experienced abuse in any way, and for men as well, that, it's so, each experience and how it plays out for each and every person is so unique. And I think one of the things that I've really been diving into lately is this idea of like, there's this whole narrative around like, as women, what can we do to prevent it, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's not our responsibility to prevent it.
Yeah.
Like what needs to happen is that the seed that's being planted in these other people that believe that it's okay to take these acts, that's what needs to shift. Yeah. Like I shouldn't need to,
like driving a lot of that too.
I shouldn't need to wear a chastity belt in order to prevent sexual abuse. Like the sexual abuse should not even be presented as an option for me to have to even react to it. And so, I've really been playing with this, like, it's not a woman's issue, really.
Yeah,
Like,
it's certainly not. We certainly have to change what men expect and what men do. And I think I'll suggest some theories to you in a second. I have a lot of theories, and we always talk about theories on the show. So I just want to remind anyone who's listening that none of this is abject. This is a continuing dialogue of theories that we're talking here, because I don't want people ever going, well, Chris Voss thinks this. A lot of stuff that I think about is very theory based and developing and trying to learn. But getting back to the Romeo and Juliet sort of story, although that might be the right equation, but the prince and the princess story, women, it seems to me, and I don't know because I've never lived through this, but it seems to me like women place a value on themselves in society. And what we do teach women is that their beauty is everything. And that the more beautiful you are perceived to be, the more you can rise in society. And there's some part of our society in our sexual nature for basis of also the chasing of beauty. Part of it's DNA chromosomal, where it's been shown that two beautiful people try and mate with each other to propagate the best looking and the best, what is perceived sometimes as the best DNA of our species. And that's why people are attracted to beautiful people on both ends of the spectrum. But I think women place a lot of beauty and value in how far they can rise in society, and get the best sort of princes to come to them. And I think that's maybe where the insecurity lies, is they see themselves for their flaws, and sometimes they overanalyze them. But they see themselves as trying to be on this thing of rising up through society or getting the right prince, all that sort of good stuff. Is that, am I kind of getting part of that thing?
Absolutely.
Or is my theory?
And I think this actually even relates back to, like we were talking about the commission thing earlier. Women are held to this unacceptable standard of perfection, whether it be our looks, whether it be, and we're more judged on our looks, and men are more judged on their accomplishments. That's how it's played out. And so we think that, like, well, I'll get further ahead, if I can adhere to these perfect measures of beauty, whereas men believe, well, I can get more ahead if I can accomplish or achieve more things. And so we place that upon ourselves, and there's these norms, quote unquote, of beauty that are perpetuated through, again, Hollywood, magazines, television, like all these things where we're fed like, oh, you want to be better in the world, like you have to look like this. And then getting added on top of that is the whole consumerism thing, where all these brands are trying to sell to us like, oh, you're not pretty enough. Here, buy my thing. Oh, you need this new, hair gel to like be in with the beautiful people this year. Or, I mean, whatever, we're fed all of these additional narratives that purposefully put us down and make us feel less than, so that they can benefit financially from us as well. That's a whole nother layer.
And if you watch the narratives, a lot of advertising, they have the narratives that the woman, she's alone, and a lot of people don't pay attention to this stuff, the nuances of these advertisements. But the woman's alone, and then she discovers this product, and then suddenly a guy prances in, or she's sleeping next to a guy because she got the right mattress, and there's a good-looking guy laying in the bed beside her, and suddenly now, and it's very clear, if you're aware of the manipulation of the nuance of the story that they're telling, and visually, and they're telling something different auditory, like buy tissue paper for whatever. But you can see in the narrative of the story, if you were to map it out like they do in the advertising agencies and screenshots and scenes, that they're taking and showing the single woman, and now she's suddenly fulfilled because Romeo's showing up in the thing because she bought the product. And that's another thing I think that plays upon both probably women and men in our roles.
Yeah, I just saw an ad recently. It was for some perfume where this woman's like biking to a photography studio and all this stuff, and she puts on the perfume, and then she's in the photography studio, and she like seduces the photographer and all this stuff, and he's all interested in her, and he turns around and she's like gone or whatever. But it again teaches that thing of like, oh, if I get this perfume, then like attractive men are going to come into my realm. They're going to be seduced by me. They're going to want me. And so it's totally a thing that women are perpetually sold this idea that like you're not enough. And if you want to be enough to like attract the man or have the success or do the thing or whatever, like you have to look beautiful, you have to buy my product, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like you're incomplete, you are not whole, you're not enough. And that is like the underlying narrative that both women and men alike, although through a lot of the advertising and stuff like that, it's mostly placed upon women. We are constantly told at every turn, you're not enough. Yeah.
What's interesting to me, when I was in the advertising industry with models and actresses, we used to own an acting and modeling agency. When women look at an ad in Vogue or Elle magazine or whatever, when they see an ad, they look at the woman, and that's who they want to become when they look at the ad. When guys look at a ad, they want to be that guy to get that woman, but not vice versa. The woman doesn't look at the ad and look at the guy and go, well, I want to dress like him so I can get hair. At least that's what our thing used to be back in the day. I don't know if it's changed, but it was interesting to me how women and men really focus on an ad differently. And there's a competition too that's very natural with women that are very catty. I mean, I was really surprised when I finally discovered that my girlfriends weren't dressing up for me or for other guys to get their attention when we go to parties. They were dressing up to compete with other women to look good. And I'm like, wow, I thought that was all for me all this time. So it's interesting, that dynamic of it all.
That's been a really common narrative for women, and one that I'm very purposeful about combating with my work and who I am in the world and everything. And, you know, especially when women started entering the workforce, there were only, again, like the Hollywood jobs, there were only like a few jobs for women. There were like, say, maybe 2 secretary jobs. I mean, look at Mad Men, right? There's like 2 secretary jobs, but like all these ad agency jobs, or the Amazon show that came out documenting how Newsweek got sued by all their female staff. There were only a handful of female occupations. Like women couldn't be reporters back in those days. And so if you wanted to rise in the ranks, you had to compete with the women that were sitting around with you. You didn't have a choice, because maybe only one of you was going to get promoted. And in order for you to be the one that got promoted, you had to rise in ranks. You had to outperform them. You had to compete with them. Where, you know, yes, there's competition between men, but it's not in such a malicious way as it is with women, because for women, that was a means of survival.
Yeah.
And for men, it's a different conversation, I believe.
Yeah, and I saw this issue. You know, I've been single all my life, dated all my life, and I saw this issue with my girlfriends, where there was the cattiness, the jealousy, the backstabbing, and a lot of, you know, they come home every night with complaints of all the women in their office place and what they were doing to them. And back in the 80s, there was a study I remember reading. One of the problems that women had in the workplace, and I think they've gotten better at this, but better at not doing it. But one of the problems they had was men, we have a tendency to club up. It's part of our hunter sort of thing. You know, we club up in groups and go find a dinosaur and kill it. Well, you know, this is just an example.
Yeah, no, it's actually a great example. I talk a lot about
historically correct, Chris.
Well, but I talk a lot about
get the idea.
As cavemen, like we still have very, very, very much caveman mentalities, and so I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and so men tend to club up. I mean, we club up very well. And women can do the same thing, but I think in some of their thing that I think they have to deal with is very catty. In being catty is a DNA genetic sort of thing, where they're competing for, once again, the best DNA and the best men with them, and you know, it's this whole sexual reproduction of the species, if you will. that keeps us, in this whole track of what we're doing. But unfortunately, I think it's really starting to cause a lot of, cataclysmic conflict problems with where we're at. But they said that the one reason that women had problems rising up through into boardrooms and breaking glass ceilings in the 80s was because they would just beat each other's throats with knives and backstabbing, where men club up and those clubs tend to ascend to the things because they all help each other do it. And I think women have gotten better at that, where they've realized that they've got to work together, they've got to help each other out. I think books like yours and Lean In from Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook can really help women learn. But I think one of the other things that the big challenge that I think that's really identified in the Me Too, and I'm not sure how we're going to solve this, so all this is theory, but one of the things we have to do is we need to come to a new social dynamics of our roles sexually, mating, dating, but also working together, because that's where a lot of our conflict is really coming to. Women often marry up, if you will, they call it. Every girlfriend I've ever had has been 5 to 10 years below me. It's become kind of more acceptable in society for women to date down, but I think that's still developing, and I don't know that a lot of women embrace that. Today, I could be wrong. I don't spend a lot of time around younger women to know what they're doing, but the other thing we have in society is women expect to be, what's the right word? They expect, okay, a man has to buy all my drinks. A man has to put the first step forward. And we certainly see from the Me Too movement, a lot of guys put their first step movement forward, and it's not done very well. And it's poorly done, but they expect us to do that. Maybe we need to change some of the societal rules of, I forget the word that I'm looking for, but being a gentleman, where, I think that subjects women when we have those different roles, where women expect to be taken care of in that certain way. And I think we need to break that mold, that a man's job is not to take care of a woman. And maybe more women need to stand up and say, I'll pay for my own drinks, I'll pay for my own dinners. I don't want to be subject to that, because once I become more of a possession than that I owe you stuff for, something like that. That's my theory. It's still in development, so no one take me.
There's definitely nuances to all of this. I actually don't think that the Me Too conversation can be included in this. I see them as two separate things, because there's malicious intent behind that.
There definitely is in a lot of the Me Too. They're malicious and sexually malicious and predatory.
Versus, like, if I'm going, say, on a date with someone and he decides to pick up drinks, like those are two, I feel like, complete separate conversations. Where, I think they need to be separated a little bit. And
let me be clear why I suggest that. And again, this is theory, but to me, in the Me Too movement, there are different levels of crimes and misdemeanors, I guess, if you will say that. There's people that are clearly, especially if you've been raped, assaulted, sexually molested, out of your control. Then those are some of the worst, I think, on the level of sexual assault. And I'm certainly not diminishing them as I go, but I'm saying there's different apparitions of that. Then there's areas where people have used power. Some of the rapes were for that, but there are people who have used power and held that over people's heads, and either giving them jobs or promotions, or having them fired and ruining their careers or lives, and going down from there. I've even seen where the Me Too has been hijacked by jilted lovers and people who kind of become people's wives, and it's been abused and hijacked in ugly ways to destroy people because their affairs didn't work out with a married man. And there really was no power or sexual abuse there, but they're hijacking the narrative to say, well, this person abused me because they had power over me because they were married and they were trying to date me.
Even through all of those examples you just gave, all of those have malicious intent behind them. All of them do. Versus if I'm going on a date with someone and, he offers to pick up the tab, I think that is more of a conversation of giving and receiving. And really, you know, for me, when I date, I ensure that I'm meeting someone as an equal, and that there's an exchange of giving and receiving, and that there's not an expectation that by him giving, say, a drink, that he's then receiving some sort of sexual something. That categorizes as malicious intent.
Okay.
For two humans to get together. I mean, it's even the same as, you know, if I were to go out for a drink or a coffee with a friend, and he offers to, out of the kindness of his heart, cover the coffee, right? Like, that's a conversation of mutual giving and receiving. And
that's what I'm also saying, though. In our society, we have to understand that even though you're buying drinks for someone, they don't owe you something, or that women are subjective or below us because we are, I don't know. There is a dominance that women do tend to like out of men, or an action dominance, if you will. Now, it shouldn't be malicious intent, like you say, but I think that's what we're struggling with. We're struggling with, how do we deal with this dominance and being powerful for women, but not crossing that line where, you know, we're being malicious intent, and then we're also working together in an environment instead of looking at each other as sexual, reproductive, propagate the species DNA. And somehow we've got to figure out how to get this all to mesh together, I guess, now is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
does that make any sense?
For me, the biggest thing, and one of my favorite books in the world, is called The Go-Giver. And the idea is really, truly, like, just giving out of a place of, you know, like, genuine desire to give with zero expectations. You know, even when, you know, a girlfriend of mine went on a date a few years ago, and she called me and she was like, he's not my husband. And I was like, been on one date with the guy. Like, how about you just, like, let go of the expectations and, like, get to know him? You know, what if that could be a possibility? And I think, you know, Buddha's known for teaching, you know, the heart of all suffering is unmet expectations. So how do we get rid of unmet expectations? Well, you get rid of expectations. You don't go into a date assuming that if I buy her a drink, she's going to end up sleeping with me. You don't go into an exchange assuming, well, you know, say I buy this person a coffee and they give me something in return. You don't go into any engagement or interaction with another human being expecting something in return. Like, you really just genuinely go with a pure heart and you give. You know, like, I just got coffee for a good friend the other day. No expectations of anything in return. Simply the fact that I wanted to pay for her coffee because I enjoy who she is as a person and I enjoy her company. And that was it. And we had a beautiful conversation, and there was no expectation of me, like, getting something and my words, getting something in return. Thank you. Damn it. Yes. Return.
I've been having one of those mornings where the coffee, I'm going to need another cup. So I've been flubbing names all podcast long here. So yeah, and you know, some of this I think too deals with youth and being at that age where your sexual drive just consumes you. Like, one of the things I've really enjoyed in getting older is not having that sexual driving bot in your head just constantly going, you know. And I think I'm kind of reaching that age where it's, you know, it seems every politician reaches, where they're like, well, you know, you guys should not have sex anymore, and I don't see what the big deal is with sex. Well, you know, your organs went bad. These guys are raging freaking hormones. You know, and I remember what that was like, and it was just maddening to be.
Well, and I think one of the problems is, because so much of the narrative right now is about, like, well, just don't have sex. Well, just abstain from it. Well, you know, prevent yourself from it. I think that by creating this, like, you can't have it, you can't do it, it creates even more of a want, right? And so the conversation for young boys needs to be around, like, what is a healthy way to experience your sexuality as a teenager, like as you're coming into puberty, what does it look like to have a healthy way to express that for you? Because it's not by taking, it's not by raping, it's not by manipulating, it's not by, you know, any of these things. And that's a huge conversation that is legit not being had in our society in any way, shape, or form. Even for women, you know, we're taught that it's like bad if we want to engage in a sexual act or whatever. And one of the things that I've really come upon in the last few months is I know that I'll be starting multiple foundations to benefit women and girls throughout, you know, the rest of my career as I continue building my business. And one of the things that came to me in December was I really want to start a foundation to help women and girls have a healthy understanding of their sexuality and really have a healthy understanding of like, what does this act mean? How, like, what does it physiologically do to you? How do you have a healthy sex life, whether it's with a partner, you know, whatever. Anyways, that's something that's really important to me. You know, unfortunately, I don't really serve or speak to boys or men as much. I mean, my book is very gender neutral, but my passion is to really help women. And so that's something that I'm really, really excited about developing, because I think it's so, so, so needed.
I think you're right. Education. I mean, we need more education.
And not
you know,
through our educational system.
Yeah. I heard a comedian put it perfectly. They said, you know, the problem with the challenges of men and women is women get these magazines and books and education. I mean, you know, I remember when I was a kid reading my girlfriend's Cosmos. You guys get whole manuals of magazines printed on how to deal with guys, how to try to, you know, they're almost like manuals on how to deal with us. Men, we get a magazine with naked pictures in it in the centerfold and go, get that. And that's our education right there.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't help. I think better education in both sexes is sitting down with them at, like you say, a very young age, probably before the faucets get turned on of the crazy sexual puberty, and sit down and someone goes, hey man, in a year or two, there's going to be some changes to your body. They're going to happen. And your brain's going to go really freaking crazy. And here's how you kind of deal with that. I don't know how much it will help, especially boys, but
I mean, I think even just having that knowledge, and then two, creating safe spaces for them to be able to talk about and experience it. Because I think what happens is so much of this happens behind closed doors, that it's a shameful thing, that we're not allowed to talk about it. We have to keep it inside. We're not allowed to process it with anyone. And especially guys, like, don't really talk about this stuff, right? Yeah. Or if they do, it's from the perspective of like the naked magazines. So
sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. I just think that having like that safe space would actually make a huge difference. I think it would significantly help.
Yeah. And to be really honest with you, men operate from their genetic DNA. We're very hunter. We go out, find a girl, get laid, done. And the same thing, you know, we go find a deer, we kill it, bring it home, eat it, done. It's our hunter mentality that we're predisposed to. And it's not something we can overcome. Certainly, like you, I think we probably share the same vision for humanity. I would hope that someday we would become a really cerebrally elevated society where we use our brains at levels and you know, everyone's equal, and we eliminate poor, and we use our brains to make money and to make the world a better place. And hopefully that will happen. Although I always say the one thing man can learn from his history is that man never learns from his history. So there is the cycle of that. But I think as a society, we are changing. I mean, we're clawing and ripping and getting to a point where we're changing our society more and more. Certainly women's... Good.
I think that just in relation to that because of our access to information, maybe for one of the first times in the history of human beings, we're starting to recognize how we're not learning anything. I was reading a book about Babylon, right? And I was reading about it, and I was like, we are still having the same conversations today as we were having thousands and thousands of years ago. But because we have a bigger access to information now, we're able to see that. I think before, you know, you'd have to go to a library and read through an encyclopedia and like this, that, and the other thing. And the access to information was just so difficult that it was hard to actually recognize that this is what's going on. And, you know, everyone's always said like history repeats itself, but I don't think we've ever actually seen history repeat itself to such a degree as we're currently experiencing. And so my hope is the more that we can witness what we're recreating in humanity again and again and again and again, like now we get to be conscious of it and be like, oh, that is legit happening. It's like we can't escape it anymore. We can't pretend it's not happening. We can't just say, well, history is repeating itself. For the first time, we now get the opportunity to do something about it.
Yeah. And I really still believe in the theory that the Me Too movement is really come out of what reached its peak to make it come out was Donald Trump and winning the election and the damage he's done to women's rights. And really what that election is about is a clawback to take us back to the 1950 standards, whether it's racist based or whether it's women's rights based. And the Women's March came out and said, you know, this is some BS going on here. And growing up from an area as a kid, seeing women put hats on their heads that look like vaginas was probably something that would never happen when I grew up in the 70s. And it's definitely liberating. So it's pretty interesting. But I think it empowers women, makes them go, hey, we're women and we're special. And we're not going to take this BS anymore from you guys.
Well, and like you were talking about earlier, possibly again, for one of the first times, even the women's movement in the 70s, I don't feel like was terribly united. But for one of the first times, women are having that thing that you were talking about earlier where guys get together in clubs. Like women are doing it now on a grand scale. I mean, that women's march last year, I'm so excited. It's happening in 2 weeks. And I'm so excited. It's on my calendar. I'm going. I will wear my feminist as fuck t-shirt. Like I'm so excited to go. And it'll be really interesting to see how it shifts this year from last year. And if there's the same turnout, if there's the same show of support and solidarity. And like, it'll be really interesting. I'm hoping that it is. In fact, I'm hoping that it's bigger than it was last year because women have
gotten better and I think society's gotten better. I mean, like I say, it used to be that, you know, we had when I grew up, we had a divorce gal next door. And no, she wasn't divorced. She was single. Her husband, when he was like 45, had a heart attack and died, which is really weird because he was so young. But and so then she just became the single woman. So she wasn't divorced, but, you know, everyone would viper about her and, oh, there's a man at her house and, oh, you know, and what is sin? And, you know, that sort of narratives going on with the women gossip. And, you know, now it's flipped the other way where it's like, those people are still married. And so, you know, having this more open sexuality, more open relationships, more, you know, I mean, even like marriage, I'm not a real big proponent of marriage. One thing I always talk about is, you know, if you notice, a lot of the Me Too people are married guys. Married guys are on 35 to 40% of most dating sites, which I hate because I have to compete with them. As a single guy, I'm like, why am I competing with married guys? They already have women. I'm trying to maybe get married. I don't know, but why do I have to compete with them? And so I would like to see, you know, we're changing as a society. And so I think the Me Too movement's going to be good. I do think the president needs to be removed from office because he's still that guy that little girls and boys are looking up to and going, well, he's the president. You know, I remember how that powerful was when I was a kid and who the president was. You know, I didn't know any of the political dynamics or stupidity that, you know, went into being president when I was a kid. I was just like, oh, he's the most powerful man in the world. And, you know, your parents go, well, you can be president someday. And hopefully that day will come where women can say to young girls, see, you can be president someday. Might be Ivanka Trump, according to the new book that's coming out.
It's not going to be. I have more faith in humanity than that.
I do. I'm trying. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
I mean, from what I'm reading, the tides are turning, and there's things that are happening, and I'm very much into like astrology and woo and like all sorts of things. And I even read an article a year before the election from this woman who said that whoever got elected would not fulfill their term. And she couldn't predict who it was going to be and who was going to get elected. But a year before the election, she predicted that whoever it was not going to be in office for the full 4 years. And so I just keep holding that intention in my heart and really praying. And in the meantime, you know, like there's not a whole lot I can do about getting Trump out of office, and I'm not even going to fucking try. It's a total, complete waste of my time. But instead, you know, last year I took 3 weeks and I wrote a book. And it is a book that is changing people's lives and giving people the opportunity to run for office and to do the things that they want to do to make an impact in the world. And I think that, you know, not all of us can say that we can remove Trump from office. And that's okay, as long as you're going out there and doing your thing, whatever your thing is, whatever it is, saying yes to it and doing it, because that's what's going to shift the tides more and more and more.
And that's I think really a lot of women are empowered to that at the Women's March. They, you know, they're coming and running for office now. We saw that in Alabama, where the women came out in unprecedented numbers and helped carry that vote, even minority women. You know, we need more people in society to help us build a more equal and balanced society where we see each other as equals. And somehow we've got to balance that with our predatory sexual nature towards each other, to where we still see each other as equals and not less, or where we only see. I think one of the problems that men have is they only see people as sexual beings, and part of it is our driving chromosome. I mean, it's often said, there was a comedian who said it perfectly one time. They said, you know, if women could see inside men's head and how we think sexually, they probably wouldn't have never anything to do with us ever again. There's a lot of stuff that's built into our DNA that keeps the society running. It's the reason advertising targets sex, TV shows, movies target sex. It's the reason they always play on those sort of heroin, you know, dynamics in their brain that sets off the chemical reactions that make us go, and so somehow we've got to deal with our society and its sexuality, and then the basis of working together in a conducive environment. And somehow we got to make this whole thing mesh better and work better, so that everyone's fulfilled, everyone's equal, and everyone gets along. Of course, I think I'm about ready to sing a John Lennon song, Imagine, right now. So,
well, and the thing that, you know, again, circling back to what I've talked about, is that the thing we have to remember, in order to make that shift, it takes each and every one of us.
Yes.
It takes me standing up and saying, I'm going to take responsibility for my life. It takes you standing up and saying, I'm going to take responsibility for my life. And each of us individually, collectively doing that, individually doing that, and then collectively all coming together, that's what's going to make the shift.
Yep.
Like me, you know, or anyone saying, well, I'm going to go change the world. Like, one person isn't going to change the world. I get the opportunity to change my clients, right? Like one person at a time, or one reader at a time, or whatever. But we focus so much on like this big thing about like all these systems need to change, and they do, but it starts with you.
Yep.
And by each of us taking the responsibility, that's what's going to make the tides shift. Because it's so easy to look at all this big stuff and be like, I'm just one person. I can't do anything. Like, I can't make an impact. I can't make a shift, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to let someone else do it. That's not what's going to make the world change. Each of us has to take responsibility for our ability to really make an impact, even if it's just running for the PTA at your kid's school, right? Like, that's going to make an impact.
Yeah, it totally is. One of my favorite things, lines from Bobby Kennedy, it's called the Ripples of Hope speech. I'm going to see if I can pull it up here real quick. Ripples of Hope speech that he gave in South Africa. He gives this amazing speech that a lot of people should read, and it's called the Ripples of Hope speech. But one of the key quotes from it is, each time someone stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lots of others or strikes out against injustice, they send forth the tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. There's another part of it where he talks about how each of us are responsible for the future and our contribution to the future and how we need to deal with that. And it's very it's towards what you're talking about, how we need to each take personal responsibility for our future, our environment, our society, and our government.
Yeah, I'm going to look that up. I feel like there's some quotes from that I would like to share.
I think you would love it. I've given people the frames from it, and I can't quickly find the each of us part of it, but he basically says each of us has a contribution to make towards a better society, to a better world. He was there talking and kind of railing against apartheid and things that were there. And of course, they were dealing with it also in America. But he was, I would advise anybody who hasn't read Ripples of Hope, read the whole speech. It's very long. If you can find the audio of it, I've always been really inspired listening to Bobby, especially this speech is really inspiring. So if you can get the audio of it, listen to it. It's great to hear because you really get the feeling.
I found a website online and it has an audio player. I'm not going to hit play now, obviously, because we will all be serenaded. But I will look into that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's.
I think you'd be inspired by that. He does use the word men and he a lot, but if you can overlook that, I edited that out as I repeated his thing, because obviously they lived in a different world in the '60s that we're changing. But teaching everyone that they have a difference they're willing to make. And that's what I hope we do get to in society, where we become a cerebral society. But, there's a lot of stuff that we have to overcome. We have to overcome religious sort of repression of women. I think recently the Catholic Church came out with a thing where they're not going to make divorce an excommunicative sort of experience.
It's bananas that at today's day and age that's still even a thing. Like, okay, when my great grandmother was getting a divorce, like, still not acceptable, but like, okay, I get it. It was the times. Like, why is that still a thing? Why?
Yeah, and these are the things we need to fix, because they affect society, and then those people in those religions or dogmas, whatever you want to call them, teach their daughters to be a certain way. The religion, of course, forces the narrative onto them. Just the narrative of it's subconscious of, well, men are priests and women are not. That used to be the norm. Men are in power and women don't. And even with, like, I grew up as a child in the Mormon church till I was 16, and even watching on TV, and even up until recently, they still discourage women from working, and they used to do a really shaming sort of thing in their conferences of, women were, evil and bad if you worked, and your job is to go home and breed kids and shut up and cook, and it was a very 50s 40s whatever sort of model, and they still feed that narrative subconsciously and subtly today across the thing of, like, well, if a woman needs to work, that's great. Okay, whatever, we're going to live with it because we don't have a choice, because society's moved against us. But we really would rather have you see you guys stay at home, stay barefoot and pregnant. And so, yeah, we have to, somehow we got to get some of this other crap out of our society, and cerebrally grow and evolve to where we don't have these 3,000 gods and boogeymen under our bed. That are regulating how we think and what we do, but that's also having an effect on society and children and the roles that we teach them to play as they grow up. So
yeah, I mean, I feel the tide shifting, and I'm very optimistic about it. Maybe naively so, but I think
you're right. I think the Me Too movement's going to be huge. I think women voters are going to come out huge in 2018. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. But we saw that in Alabama, in a state that's highly repressive, that doesn't champion a lot of women's rights. I think there's, it doesn't even matter about clinics. I mean, you've seen so many different things that these new political leaders have done against women's rights. I just sat back as a man and gone, wow, I'm glad I'm not a woman, because they're just getting screwed by these guys. Planned Parenthood.
I keep thinking I'm glad that I had surgery 5 years ago so that I can't have children, because if I had to deal with all the shenanigans going on around even getting access to birth control right now, what do we want to go back to the days of the coat hangers? Like, I'm sorry, but I can't. And that's another thing. Women's sexuality and reproductive rights are two of the first topics that I'm going to be creating foundations around, because it is unacceptable to me that we don't have, one, the knowledge, and two, the access to resources that we need to be successful in the world. And I am unwilling, this is like a total soapbox, if you can't tell, my energy shifted. I am unwilling to allow that to be the reality anymore. It's just not acceptable. And I just can't. I
totally agree with you. And then the biggest challenge we have is, and a perfect example of what I'm saying about religion being a part of the repressive narrative towards women is they're the ones that are promoting some of these leaders now that are taking away a lot of women's rights. And I know some people might listen to this and be like, oh, Chris is against abortion clinics or for abortion clinics, and no, is that liberal, whatever. And I don't really think of myself as a liberal, but I guess I fall in that category. But even just normal women's rights that these leaders are taking away, like they recently took away some of the childhood or the child support mechanisms, I think, for welfare and stuff like that. I forget what it is. But they've taken some of that away. The attacks on Planned Parenthood. Every girlfriend I had got their birth control at Planned Parenthood. They had their visits for their stuff.
Even just yearly visits. Over the last 5 years or not the full 5 years, but for 3 of the last 5 years, have really been struggling financially to make it in my business. And without Planned Parenthood, I wouldn't have been able to have seen a doctor. There's just no other option.
Yeah, and I remember the picture last year of all the men who were in the room to decide about women's health and then in the healthcare bill. Do you remember that?
Oh, do I ever?
There was I remember looking at it and going, wow. And I even as a man who's dated women and driven them to Planned Parenthood for birth control pickup and their visits, I still don't have a full comprehension of women need a whole lot more healthcare than we do. They just have, their parts are different and their needs are different, and they have reproductive orders. We can't have kids. They're far more complex than we are. And they just need more health things. I mean, the example I brought up to you earlier about how we had trouble hiring a lot of women on commission was, the other part was, back then we eventually did start offering health insurance, but originally we didn't offer health insurance because people that were working with us on sales commission were making 10 to 20 grand a month. And I'm like, screw you, you're making 10 to 20 grand a month, go buy your own health insurance. And unfortunately, and we did have to change that, but a lot of women still wouldn't get that. They're like, you don't offer health insurance? I'm like, no, but you get paid 20 grand a month as a salesperson. You can afford it. But they just wouldn't, the security of that nature. In fact, a lot of men would have to quit their jobs once they got married because they didn't have health insurance. And so we finally had to add that to our workplace thing. But it's interesting to me. I really believe men don't have a good concept of how much medical attention women need. Maybe they do if they work for a doctor's office or they work for an insurance agency. But most men, I don't think, really have a good concept as to how much women need more medical stuff. And you guys do approach medical differently, although and there also is important to, we want these kids to be raised right and be birthed right, where we have a low mortality rate and stuff. And so we do need to take care of women so that, the kids work and come out the other end healthy, and, we propagate society so we won't die next generation.
Well, and it's not even infant mortality rate. I mean, the mortality rate for women giving birth is astronomical. For us being the advanced society that we are, we should not be dealing with women's mortality rates during birth. We just shouldn't.
It's interesting to me. I hate to get too political, but some of the new policies that this administration put in, where they're basically, and there's I think there's some states that have done some really radical stuff recently, where they've said to women that, like, we don't care if your life's in danger, you don't get to you don't get to end the life, even if you end up dying because of it. Screw you.
Yeah, I'm not 100% knowledgeable on that stuff.
I think there's a couple states that have passed some laws that they've extended or they've reduced the time or reasons why. I think there's one, it's probably Kansas, because they're always up to something, where they've made a law, and it's being fought right now, I think, in court, where they made a law that takes away a lot of good reasons why women can end a pregnancy, even if it endangers their life, which is very dangerous in my mind.
The thing about all this too that makes me angry is that there's so much going on, like stuff like this. And part of the reason I don't know about these things is because I can't stay informed.
I reached the same sort of thing recently.
In order for me to stay in the light that I stay in and the energy that I stay in order to create and empower like I am, I can't know about this stuff. Like, I can't stay on top of it all, because if I do, well, one, it's a total time suck. And two, I'm not able to maintain my energy to be able to serve and be the change in the world that I'm here to be. And so it's just, it sucks. I don't like being uninformed. I really don't. I don't like being ignorant about stuff. I don't like being naive about stuff. And I'm at kind of the point in my life and business where I can't be fully informed, and it sucks.
It's a hard balance right now. A lot of people have struggled with it. I mean, I spent the last year just raging at every little movement of this sort of authoritarian, oppressive rule and everything they're doing to destroy people's rights and stuff. I think about a month ago, I broke. And a friend of mine referred me to Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. And that's actually been really helpful. So I suggest it to you and my readers, if you haven't checked out his books yet. That's actually been really helpful in helping me manage this outer information and being able to look at it objectively. I had to unplug myself for about a month from it all to try and get some cerebral control over it. But it's really helping me now. I can look at a lot of stuff on news sites. I don't get too into it because, like you say, you get sucked in. But I can look at a lot of stuff objectively now and not have it melting down emotionally or mentally my whole life. So if you get a chance.
My recommendation for any, get in bite-sized chunks, because that book is in.
What's the book name again? You broke up really quick there. Eckhart Tolle. You've read that?
Yeah. So I would recommend to anyone reading it, like, read it in bite-sized chunks. Like, don't try to devour the entire book in one sitting, because it's an intense book. I think that I still haven't fully finished it because I've just been having to, like, whittle away at it here and there. There's a lot of information in it, and it's really good, but it's really rich. And so that was a book that I had to put it down for about 6 months because I was just like, I can't. It's a lot. So bite-sized chunks. It's a good one.
Yeah, I've been spinning on Audible, and I've been just listening to it over and over again. Sometimes I'll play at night. It really helps on Audible too, because he has this really calming voice that's kind of like, and so
I can't do audiobooks.
Go a little bit more peaceful. But I definitely recommend the book for everyone. It's kind of like I'm kind of angry at all my friends. They're like, "Yeah, that's a really good book. We read it. You should probably read it." I'm like, "Why didn't you tell me all this time? Why are you hiding this from me?" Well, I know, but no, it's been really a enlightening book in dealing with some of the stuff, and now I can perform a lot more objectively. And I probably had my best productive months in years this last month. where I've been able to work and focus on stuff, because I do a lot of ADD problems where I get over here and over there, you know, craziness.
Yeah.
So there's that. Well, so give us the plugs for the book again, Bri, and let's talk about that.
The book is called Permission to Leap. It is in paperback and on Kindle. You can find it on amzn.to, just either searching my name or Permission to Leap. It's a pretty good book. I actually just started reading it like last week, because I haven't read it. I did most of it in meditation and channeling. So I was reading it and I was like, this is actually a good book. Like, I don't know how it came out so cohesive, but I wrote a good book. Who knew? Who knew?
I do that at night. I did that in the past at night. I drink a lot and then wake up the next morning going, who wrote that beautiful stuff? So I know that feeling. So everyone go check out your website's briseeley.com.
Yes. And all my socials, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all under Bri Seeley.
Cool. You've got that great unique name that I used to have. Unfortunately, some other Chris Voss came up in the world. I got a hitman job out on him. But anyway, everyone check out Bri Seeley. Thanks for the wonderful discussion. We had a great discussion here, of course, about women's values and rights. And hopefully, in the end, we can reach a point where we become a cerebral society where everyone's treated as equals. No one is subjected to predators, I think is how I want to say it. And we just build a more enlightened society where everyone gets along and everyone's happy and fulfilled. So that would be great.
Let's do that.
Hopefully we can do that by tomorrow at noon. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We certainly appreciate our audience. You guys are a great audience. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit that bell notification, like button, comment. Please support the channel as much as you can. It's getting harder and harder to keep putting stuff on YouTube. So please, you know, give us some love. Help the channel out. Keep it alive so we can keep bringing great content. Go to iTunes, Google Play, the TuneIn app. I think we're on Spreaker and a few other things now as well. We apply to Spotify for fun. That should be interesting if that comes about. Anyway, be sure to support the channel. We certainly appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.